Guys, we did it. We made it to the big 3-0. That's right, episode 30 of Stuff Explained. I can't believe 30 weeks of Stuff Explained. Consecutive weeks, no breaks, no stopping. And I'd like to thank all of you, all the listeners from really all around the world. I was actually surprised to see all the different countries that the listeners are tuning in from. And for all you listeners, however you're tuning in, whatever platform you are using, please do me a huge, huge favor and leave some reviews. The reviews help. The ratings definitely help, especially if they are 5 stars. The 5-star reviews are super duper appreciated. And besides just getting to know what the general feedback is from listeners, it also helps the podcast itself become more visible on these platforms, which will help more people find it and listen to it. And it just helps the podcast itself become bigger, and that would be fantastic. I'd love to see how this thing can grow with your help, of course. And with that being said, also reach out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Motley Experience. Just no E at the beginning of experience. And yeah, you can also email info@themotleyexperience, fully spelled out.com, and just leave any notes, comments, things you might want to be read on the next episode. And without any further ado, let's get into episode 30 of Stuff Explained.
Life is a journey of exploration, learning, and growth. Basically, the world is full of fascinating stuff. Join me, Aristidis Marousas, as I uncover interesting facts and discuss big ideas on Stuff Explained from the Motley Experience. Experience your world.
All right, everybody. As mentioned in the opening, this is episode 30. That to me is a big deal. 30 weeks, and you might say that, this is just a human construct, these numbers, and we're the ones who assign meaning to them, and 30 doesn't mean anything. Well, you know what? I think 30 is pretty darn important. And this is a big idea episode. And what I'd like to discuss in this particular episode is the concept of tuning out. And I'll just give some examples from my own life of how I've tuned out different things and how it's benefited me, how I think it's benefited me anyways, and why it might be something for you to consider, some food for thought, something to chew on, and just think about how you might be able to practice tuning out and if it's relevant in your life. I have a feeling that for many of us, it is definitely something with relevancy, especially in today's world. So, with that being said, onwards to tuning out. So, the big idea, once again, tuning out. What does that mean? If you don't find it self-explanatory, I'll do my best to explain it right now. Tuning out simply means that you pick certain things, for lack of a better term, that they could be people, content, really just a variety of any type of stimulus, information, whatever in your life, in your world, that you take in, that you consume, that you have to accept in your life willingly or unwillingly in some situations. Tuning out is an active, conscious effort to create space between you and something that you think is causing you more harm than good. And it doesn't have to be a malicious type of harm. It could just be, it just aggravates you a little bit. It causes you a little extra frustration in the morning, and who needs that? Anxieties, worries, concerns. And it's just, again, creating that space from you and that thing. So one super great example that I've really been living in my own life is politics. And not to get into any politics for or against any specific party, but back in 2016, I was totally into the entire process. I was reading up on the news, following up on the candidates, seeing what was going on, tweeting, Facebook status posting, taking in all the news, commenting, replying to other people's comments that weren't even on my posts. And it just got, looking back, a bit out of hand. I was completely swept up in the process, which from one standpoint, you might say, oh, as a citizen of the United States, which is where I reside, that might be a good thing that you're part of the process. However, looking back in retrospect, I could see how getting swept up wasn't necessarily a healthy thing. And the emotions I was feeling throughout that process, especially dealing with people who had opposing viewpoints and who at the end of the day had absolutely no intention of changing their minds. And to be completely honest, in most cases, I wasn't willing to change my mind anyways because I thought that I was right or had the moral high ground or whatever other terms you can use. I basically thought that I was right and they were wrong, essentially. And they thought the same thing. And so when that happens, boom, you have a head-to-head collision, which only leads to frustration and even hurt feelings, or worse, the end of relationships and stuff like that. So this election cycle, I have made a conscious effort to stay as far away as possible. I am still informed. I have morning newsletters that come in, and I skim through it. I don't really read in depth unless it's something I find particularly interesting. I also do a newsworthy weekly segment on the Motley Experience blog where I essentially summarize the week's headlines that weren't in the mainstream news that I think were important. And sometimes it's important to note what's going on in the world of politics. But for the most part, I really stayed out of it. And you can criticize me for saying, oh, you're not being an engaged citizen, and now more than ever it's important to do that. But for me, it was really more of a mental health break from it. Just from my experience from the last election cycle, seeing how cynical people are today, how polarized the nation is, and people and things of that nature, it was doing me more harm than good. And so I've taken that step away from news in general. The only news I really consume just comes from what I read in the morning. And it's just 5 minutes. I just do a brief reading, and I have different sources for that, different newspapers that I'm signed up to. And that's really it. I don't watch the news. I used to have like news podcasts and things like that. I stay away from that too. And so I stay informed. I see, whatever headlines might be trending on, Facebook or Twitter, but I don't engage. I don't put myself in those situations as much as I used to. I also avoid, as much as possible, getting into like Twitter threads and Facebook comment threads and things of that nature. So I think I've done a pretty good job staying away. That might be harder as we get closer to election day, but for now, I really do feel lighter in comparison to the last cycle and compared to a lot of people I know, even friends who are staying on top of everything now. It's just another stressor that you really don't have that much control over. Of course, the vote is powerful, but on a daily basis to just allow yourself to be bombarded with what's honestly a lot of negativity just isn't healthy. There's enough things to worry about in your daily life to focus on without this added stressor of these external events, these external people that, once again, in the grand scheme of things, you don't have much control on in your day-to-day. So yeah, and also just as a part of tuning out in general, you're not just tuning out and ignoring it, and it's important to note you're not sort of putting your head in the sand and creating your own bubble. Tuning out is not creating your own bubble. Tuning out is basically taking breaks from those external things so you can focus on yourself first. I'm a very firm believer that you need to have your own house in order before you can fix someone else's. If you've ever been on an airline, in the videos, they say put your mask on first before you put on that of the person next to you. I think it's the same with this kind of work. And I found it that I'm more capable of being of help and knowing when to help and when to not help. Not perfect by any means, but I have noticed I'm getting better at it. by doing that focus on myself. Because a lot of the times when we react to external stimuli, it's really because of our own projections and insecurities and trigger points. And once you really dig in and do that work on yourself to figure out what those are, become aware of it, become conscious, and then take steps to healing those and replacing what you might consider, quote, bad habits with healthier ones, you are then in a much better position to see the situation, accept the situation, and think of a way to aid the situation as best as possible with all parties in mind. Because sometimes when we help, even if we don't realize it, we're helping with our own benefit in mind. And so tuning out allows you to have that space, allows you to focus on yourself first. And this isn't selfish. This is just sort of, it's a way of self-healing and just self-rejuvenating even. It's not selfish. So don't ever think about taking time for yourself selfish. And that's what tuning out is. And there's tons of other examples of tuning out. It could be negative friendships that you have. You want to sort of avoid that. Maybe office gossip. Sort of try to tune out the office gossip. Don't get swept up in that. And the list really goes on and on. It varies by person and what's going on in their lives. Politics, again, I brought up because that just seems the most obvious example. News and politics are fantastic examples. And I'm just trying to think, is there anything else? I think that's pretty much a good summary. I really don't want this to go on and on forever. So if you have any questions, reach out. But yeah, just to summarize, once again, tuning out is consciously taking space, or rather making space, between you and whatever is going on in the external world that is causing you more harm than good. Oh, social media. Social media is a huge one. I've spoken about it in podcasts, and also I've written some blog posts about it on themotleyexperience.com about our social media is where we consume, especially for millennials and younger, where we consume a vast majority of content. And it can either be fantastic, it could be a vision board, which I strongly encourage you to create a vision board out of your social media, particularly things like Instagram where it's super visual, or it can be extremely toxic where you're comparing yourself to others, where you're seeing all this negative news, on and on and on and on. And so you end up scrolling through your feed because, we're all kind of addicted to it to one level or another. And are you seeing things that are making you feel anxious and nasty inside and just feeling very negative and pessimistic about the world around you? Or are you seeing things that make you happy and that make you feel like there is still something good in humanity and that all humans are still innately good? And so on and so forth. Things that you aspire to be versus people that you're comparing yourself to in a negative way. So just a quick example, the way I've tuned out a lot is on my Instagram. I've cleaned out a lot of the accounts that I used to follow, many of them being like Instagram models, men and women, but mostly women, and just either comparing myself or having sort of a twisted view of what femininity looked like, of what masculinity looked like, of what life should look like. And instead, if I go on my feed now, it's a lot of like affirmations and sort of psychology notes and things of that nature, and travel posts and so on and so forth, friends, things like that. And I immediately felt a difference when I was scrolling through. Instead of feeling that my life sucks and it should be something that it isn't, and comparing myself to someone else's when I don't know their full story, it's a much healthier way of existing. And that's another form of tuning out. In this case, I'm tuning out what was making me feel bad and replacing it with what made me feel good. And again, I just want to reiterate before we end this podcast, we need to be conscious that we're not creating a bubble. That's part of the problem in society today, that social media allows us to create bubbles that we exist in where no other ideas are able to infiltrate. And so all we're seeing is the same thoughts and ideas we already have. And most of the time we already think we're right. And this just proves it. And that tends to vilify someone else. I'm right, you're wrong, and you're not only wrong, but you're morally wrong, or you're evil, or you're this, or you're that. And that's not what life is. Life isn't that black and white. Life really is just this massive gray area. So tuning out is not bubble creations. And you need to make sure you're the only one who can really ascertain if your tuning out is leading to a bubble creation, or if your tuning out is just leading to a break from things that are making you feel bad. So that's tuning out. It's something that, as you can tell, I feel pretty passionately about. I just went on a nonstop rant. In one take. Awesome. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter, on really any social media, and also my website, ATMAROUSAS. I'm also on TikTok. I recently had a video that kind of blew up, so I'm TikTok famous now. You're welcome. Hello. And in all seriousness, it's late, guys. It's late on a Sunday. I just meal prepped, did a whole bunch of stuff, laundry, the whole shebang. I'm tired. Anywho, so AT Marousas. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. My website is the same thing. The Motley Experience you can also find on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the YouTube, and obviously themotleyexperience.com. Reach out, use the hashtag StuffExplained when you're reaching out. Talk about this episode, what you liked, what you didn't like. Did anything resonate with you? I'd love to know if these things I go on tangents on, these big idea episodes particularly resonate with listeners, because I know the listeners are out there. I have the stats to prove it, and you guys are listening from all over the world. So feel free to reach out. Hashtag StuffExplained, Twitter, Instagram, and info at themotleyexperience.com. I have absolutely no problem if you want to send me a letter, and I can read it at the beginning of every episode. I always love it when other podcasters do that, and I think that would be something cool to do myself. But I need y'all to reach out and let me know. Can you hear me? So as you can tell, my tiredness is getting to me. My tiredness. Oh, is that even a phrase? Exhaustion. So I'm going to end on this because it's turning into a rant. It's coming off the rails pretty quickly right now. So I hope everyone stays well, and I'll talk to you next week. Pretty good episode 30, if I do say so myself. And I do.
Psst, hey you. Yeah, you over there listening to Stuff Explained from the Motley Experience. So if you're already listening to Stuff Explained from the Motley Experience, why not take that next step and head on over to themotleyexperience.com/connect. Then all you got to do is enter your email address and you instantly become a part of the Motley Experience community. By doing this, you'll get the weekly insider newsletter that gives you all the latest and greatest from the Motley Experience, including updates from your favorite podcast, Stuff Explained. Again, themotleyexperience.com/connect. There's absolutely nothing like having custom-made quality music for whatever your project might be. So if you're in the market for custom-made music, look no further than Retcon Industries. They provide tailor-made music for all sorts, whether it's professional wrestling, podcasts, trailers, and so much more. They can do it for you. So for more information, go to www.retconindustries.com or email my good friend Greg at retcongreg@gmail.com. Retcon Industries can also be found on Facebook and on Instagram at Retcon Industries. That's RETCON Industries. written and produced by me, Aristidis Marousas. Music is produced by the talented Greg Massey of Retcon Industries. Visit themotleyexperience.com for more thoughtful original content, and you can also find links to the sources used for each episode of Stuff Explained. Like us on Facebook at The Motley Experience, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Motley Experience, and use the hashtag Stuff Explained. If you liked this episode, leave a review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thank you for listening.